it was just exposure to psilocybin. And you can see that mom is in a displaying or displaying stress related behaviors, excuse me, and not displaying caregiving behaviors. And I absolutely think about it like those pups are probably crying. They're probably
Right,
emitting
right,
ultrasonic vocalizations, and from a sensory standpoint, how must that what is that experience
right.
like?
Imagine tripping on mushrooms while your baby's crying in the next room. Yeah,
Doesn't
that's
sound
not going
good.
to be
Yeah.
good.
No.
Okay, so there's two ways in principle here I can imagine the psilocybin affecting the pups. One is through the mother's behavior, which is altered. So obviously, if this is altering her behavior, it's going to affect how she interacts with the pups. That's going to affect the pups developmentally. The
Yes.
other potential avenue here is that some of it might get into the pups from the milk. So let's talk about the pups now. I'll let you guide us in terms of where to go next, but are they getting exposed to it in the milk at all? And, how does this transition into how they are affected later on in life?
Absolutely. So we did not separate mom and infant after the injection, as I just mentioned, and so we assumed that there could potentially be transfer. We did conduct an experiment to test that assumption, and we looked at. We actually didn't look at the milk. We looked directly at the brain of the infants to see if we could find psilocin, which is the active metabolite of psilocybin that really is producing all of the effects. And we did find psilocin in the brain of pups, so it does seem as though it's able to transfer through the milk and reach the brain of the developing offspring. This would have been on postnatal day 7. So mom received one exposure, so pups would have received one exposure. The amount of psilocin that we see in the brain is much less in the pup than what we would see in the mom, which again is what we would expect. And then we followed pups in adulthood to see whether or not that exposure that happened at postnatal day 7 produced any changes in their behavior. And to look at their behavior, we conducted a behavioral test battery very similar to what we did in mom, looking at, again, cognitive behavior, social behavior, anxiety like behavior, depressive like behavior. And what we found in the pups, we looked at what we found in the adult offspring, because they're adults at this point, and we looked at males and we looked at females, is we found overall an increased risk for what we would call behavioral impairments. So when we do these batteries, we do look at the individual results of each test, but to get a better idea of behavioral change across the test battery, we also use and we z-score each individual behavior, and then we look at the sort of average of their behavior across all of those tests, and we see increased behavioral impairments associated with that single exposure in males and in females. And of course, this is, just to be clear, this is more than 100 days after that initial
Right.
single exposure.
Right, right, right. So this is a lasting effect. This is, they're developing differently as a consequence
Mhm.
of having been brought up in this fashion related to the psilocybin treatment of the mother, which is changing her behavior. So like
Mhm.
their whole childhood effectively has now been different in terms of how they interact
Altered.
with their mother. So this is a pretty big effect.